Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by James, who is an intermediate photographer from Canada. Don't have much metadata. We know James shot this with an f2.8 70-200 zoom at f2.8. Under backstory, James lets us know that this is the main subject of the image right here. He says that looking through the viewfinder, he saw the potential to imply between these two flowers this sort of reaching out, or this implied connection. So that's the main subject of the picture. And under questions, heavily paraphrasing here, James says that this is a favorite image of his, but it's not liked by too many people that see it, and he's wondering, based on that, if there's anything that I might do to change the image. When I first looked at this image, I really loved the shallow depth of field. So this flower, this close flower in the background back here, very, very soft based on a shallow depth of field. In addition to that, it almost looks like James is shooting through something here that's softening even more overall, or maybe using a soft focus filter. And he mentions in his backstory really liking to work with subjects in an impressionistic way, and I think that's a beautiful part of this image, particularly given the subject matter. Also drawn to high energy color, the color opposite here of magenta and green. That pair, very, very powerful, really draws my eye. Fascinating thing is that looking at the image and then reading James' backstory, I was amazed to run up against sort of two opposite feelings. When I first looked at this image, there were so many things that I liked, but I almost immediately wanted to either move this flower or this flower to create a separation here. And then when I read that James said this is the main idea, I'd ask myself, okay, why did I want to actually break things up? And I quickly came to the conclusion that it was because of color. And so in a lot of ways, the critique today is about color. A lot of the takeaways are connected to color. I say this quite a bit, but it's really worth saying in this image again today. One of the amazing things about color is that it sits in front of the imagery itself. So in other words, the impact of color here, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, is going to happen before a person, on average, is even impacted by the idea of the shape or the archetype of the flower itself. Color is that powerful. Color is also very complicated. It's not only the name of the color, that's what we typically think about, so orange or pink or green. It's also the value of color, how bright or dark is a color, and then it's also the intensity of color. How vibrant is the color, how saturated, how intense is the color idea. In addition to all of that, color has an effect at the level of frequency, going back to hue, but also has huge effects just in terms of our own personal history. We live in a social structure, culture. We have had experiences in our own life that end up meaning, after a certain period of time, that we associate colors with feelings. Color is incredibly complicated. One of the things that's happening in this image is that color is flattening out what could be a suggestion of movement on the z-axis or through this composition. We know in reality that photographs are only two dimensions, so moving up and down and left and right, x and y axis. But we can imply the third dimension, feeling of depth from near to far, this idea of distance through the picture. Do that, we could use a variety of elements and principles of design. One of the most powerful things that can suggest this illusion of depth is color. And what's interesting is that the color scheme right now is actually working against that. This is a close flower out of focus. This is where James focused. Flower in the middle. This is a flower behind this flower. And then this is a background behind this flower. So actually, we can intellectually know that this picture includes a field of information that's pretty deep. What's happening is that on the three of the main subjects, the flowers, there's a super high value color idea, this hot pink, and it ties all three of these concepts together. So we don't get this illusionary sense that they're sort of from near to far. Another thing that's happening, boy, can you really see it in the simple area of the image. You can see that there is quite a bit of a yellow cast, maybe a little bit yellow-green, that's happening everywhere in the image. And yellow and yellow-green, those are very, very high value color ideas. All of that adds up to mean that the potential depth that we could be showing here is not being shown. And what's happening is color is giving me the feeling as the viewer that all of these things are in the same place and that this is flat. When it comes to storytelling, if James is trying to tell a story not only about connection but actually reaching for connection, we know from classical storytelling we have to have conflict for the payoff to have an effect. That's the way we classically tell stories. To get to connection, then we want to have a lot of conflict to get there. We want to have to reach from a far distance. And right now what's happening is that all these ideas, because of color, even though the image is suggesting they're in different places, the color is saying something completely different. It's saying, you know what, all these ideas, this, and this, they're already all in the same place. So when two of these ideas try to get closer, they're already really close. And so it's sort of a closeness is too far, a step too far. This starts to feel like, when I originally looked at the image, as a tangency that's actually too much closeness instead of something that is a connection across a far distance. And so if we want to change color relationships here, and James might be open to that, he's open to the idea of abstracting through an impressionistic look, then we could just go to the adjustment layer of hue and pull on the hue slider. And in fact, that's what I did here. The fascinating thing about color is this multi-dimensional. When I pull to this point, I start to get a sense of a lot more depth in this image, and it starts to work better for me, and I want to talk more about that. But we not only have affected color relationships. Remember, color connects to something else that's incredibly elemental in terms of trying to imply form and physical depth. That's value, relative brightness and darkness, and that's changed in a dramatic way by moving this slider. And that's how just one little way to start to show how incredibly complicated color is. I wanted to show you how I made the change, but I actually sort of exaggerated the change by combining a few steps, and they're all right here on this color changes layer. So I'm just going to hit the delete button to throw away the hue saturation layer. Most of the work that I did was on the hue saturation layer. And let's go ahead and turn this eyeball on, and we can turn this on and off now and look at the difference. One of the things that's happened here is that it's a lot more of a feeling of color separation. There's a lot more of a feeling of different colors playing out in different areas. We get a sense now of sort of 4 different colors. We get a sense of yellow, kind of orange peach, this sort of pastel, blue, and then green. And right here, the pink and the yellow green are kind of overwhelming everything. It's interesting, the orange almost doesn't stand a chance sitting next to that pink, and so it doesn't create much separation. But watch this, here's the fascinating thing. When I changed the hue, when this orange became a yellow, then value comes in a very, very powerful way to start to imply more of a feeling of near to far. The yellow is incredibly bright compared to the orange. So it's not just that this peach, orange, and yellow are doing a better job of separating. We just want to talk about one part of color, hue. It's that the real bright feeling, the high energy value feeling of the yellows, creating much more feeling of form and depth, and that helps to create more of the feeling of the z-axis in the image. The other thing that's happened that's really powerful is that in the area of our main subject we have almost a pair of color opposites, and the energies here couldn't be any more important to the story that we're trying to tell. Blue is a color that for so many people it represents things that are very, very deep, both physically and psychologically. The still blue of water, the deep blue of a clear blue sky, and then the space that represents. Now we have that blue in a flat area, sort of a negative space area of the image, and then coming across that blue that does represent still, calm, and a lot of space. It's the high energy spear shape of the petal of flowers and a real high energy color. So even within this area we're starting to suggest a lot more depth than we were getting here, where the pink and the yellow, green, and all that is mixed into a way where there's not much separation at all. And even the shape of that circle starts to create more of a feeling in this part of the image that is powerful to the story. But what's even more powerful is that this is an area that really draws my eye and seems to be different than other things. This is an area that draws my eye, and even the background. These shapes down in here before that were overwhelmed by the pink in the top left corner. On this diagonal originally, this did not stand a chance against this. Now this more mysterious, this really beautiful area that has shapes that rhyme the main ideas it starts to play in a powerful way on the across the rest of the image. The value change that happened in here is creating so much more depth in this part of the image, and these dark values now can play with these areas. There's now an image where I move around a lot more. I don't go straight to this. I get to this. It's now sort of the story that I feel like James is wanting to tell. This is here, and then there's this reaching out. It's a part of a much bigger story. Here's where we started out. Here's where we're now. I'd love to hear your feedback about the critique today and how the color change either worked or maybe didn't work for you. No matter whether it worked or not, I really want to encourage you when you go inside of Photoshop to look at all of your images. Number one, in black and white. If you just get rid of the color for a minute, it can really help you to start to understand the value part of the equation, because color makes it so difficult to see anything else. Is one of the first things that I do. And another thing that I do to most of my images, even if I'm happy with them, is I will come in and I will move this hue slider to just see what happens when color relationships change. And it's really sort of amazing, all the different effects, because of how complicated color is, that are happening when we start to change color relationships. I want to say a big thank you to James. I want to say a big thank you to you for being here. Hope to see you again real soon on The Mindful Eye.